Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Grady room, which is our now fully functional, fully equipped podcast-like studio. We got cameras everywhere. We got microphones, so we can do pre-recorded. We can do live here. It's pretty exciting. There's, a lot of changes going on here, and there's going to be a lot of changes coming up in December. And so those of you who don't know me, I'm Noah. I've been working for St. John Institute for the last 5 or so years. And despite all of my requests, Father Nathan has insisted that I sit in front of the camera, even though I spent my entire career behind the camera for a reason. But here we are. And so, first, Father Nathan, what's it like to be actually using this studio?
It's really neat because when we originally made the room, we thought it was going to be a storage room. And then we found someone had donated the wood planks on the walls from their deck. And so I said, let's put those on a wall. I thought that would be pretty kind of cool. And then it looked so nice that the storage room became our nicest room. And then you came in with your, artistic skill and was like, we ought to do this. And it kind of exploded into this. So it's neat to see it evolve. And I'm grateful to all of our benefactors who made this thing possible, because now we can do these types of conversations. And this is something I started the first time I wanted to do this was in 2010. That I wanted to have my own studio so that then we can just do neat things like this. And so it's neat to see it come to fruition.
Yeah. And it's just the beginning, right? By the time this comes out, it'll probably come out just a little bit before, we're going to launch our DGT website. Finally, after years of me telling everybody that we're going to launch this site, we're finally doing it. And just like every year, we're kind of trying something new here, but we wanted to, every year during Advent, we like to do something during Lent, we like to do something. So I thought this would be a great opportunity for us to kind of just sit down and talk about like what's coming up during Advent. So Father, do you want to
Well, I remember the conversation we had was we were sitting with someone who said, you ought to do a retreat on the O Antiphons. And I thought, that's kind of neat because it's a neat theme. And I remember the first time I ever heard about the O Antiphons. By the way, we're going to explain what that means, antiphon and the O Antiphons. You're going to hear about them. But I remember when the first time I was listening to NPR radio back in high school. And I knew the Lord, so I had this robust faith, but I was listening to NPR. And they had a segment on December 17th, and they had monastic chanting. And I was so excited because I was Catholic and I knew Jesus. And then there was this chant that was coming out, and they explained the O Antiphons at the time. It was like a 3-minute segment. And I still remember it because it so struck me that the power of this art to touch our culture, and that people at NPR were kind of like in awe and reverence for. And so then, of course, when I became more religious, and I was religious for 25 years, the O Antiphons were always an important part of Advent. So when the person said, let's do a retreat on the O Antiphons, I thought that would be really neat to allow other people to get to see what these are and to appreciate them, because it's a spot where faith meets art, meets the nostalgic and spiritual time of the year. So it's just a great moment for us all to take a step closer to God.
And you remember what I said?
No.
What are the O Antiphons?
So
hence I was like we should probably tell people what they are before we actually do it.
Yeah. And then I immediately am like, well, Father Francis Therese knows more about this than anybody that I know. And it would just be so great to have him on. So thanks for coming in, Father.
Oh, it's great to be here.
So it's Father Francis Therese, 2 names.
That's right.
Like Teresa. So.
Yeah, but Therese isn't my last name.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
the second part of my religious name. Francis of Assisi and St. Therese of the Child Jesus. Those 2 October saints.
I always make fun of the brothers because it's like you get to pick your own superhero name. And like, I feel like some of the guys go too far where they're like Mary, Joseph, and the child Jesus. And like they just tack on as many as they can. I mean, who wouldn't, right?
Extra help.
Yeah, right. Father, you've been really kind of into sacred music, kind of most of your life, I'd say, or can you tell us a little bit about how you got into it?
Yeah, no, I grew up loving music. I studied piano for a good 17 years. Yeah, I played saxophone in high school band, taught myself the guitar, And when I joined the religious life, it was the first exposure I really had to chant, sacred music. I think it was even strange growing up in the Catholic Church and not really being exposed even to the Latin language for the most part. I think it was I still wasn't entirely sure how Latin fit into what it meant to be Catholic until I entered the religious life, and the Brothers of St. John, the congregation that I'm part of, we did incorporate a fair amount of Latin hymns into our liturgy, our sung liturgy. And so that was really, like, for me, the first encounter I had with Gregorian chant, and just was fascinated by it. So it wasn't until, I joined the religious life that I had any exposure to sacred music. Most of the stuff I learned on piano was, Debussy. It's just kind of impressionist stuff, which is great. But and I think that what's really eye-opening is how all of Western music, all of the music that we have in the West is based on the developments that took place in the church, and notably with sacred music and kind of the high point of it, which is Gregorian chant.
I'm thinking about a lot, like you've taught me so much just in our few conversations about just the role that music plays, especially during the Mass, and how it's so funny. It seems like these days, like music is like the fill the gaps.
Right.
Like it's just like it's almost like the like lounge music or the whatever in between the different acts of the Mass, and that's never what it was, right?
No, absolutely not. It's fascinating. I've been reading, it's actually real short, but it's a history of Christian music of the first 4 centuries, which is like,
what a book.
Everybody's got a copy of this, but it's really hard to get a hold of. And to me, it was fascinating was to find out that in the early church, we saw pretty quickly in the first few centuries people taking on positions. You had the priests, the deacons, the bishops, the readers, even the widows. They were even part of, and some people saw them as part of kind of this hierarchy. But you don't see anywhere mentioned in the first three to 4 centuries of the history of the church, cantors. So even within the context of the liturgy, you didn't have that designation. And most importantly, because reading itself, those who were reading, those who were using their voice in public, were doing something that we probably would consider musical today. And so there wasn't, liturgy was in the Christian liturgy in its history was never something that was just conversational or spoken or without the grandeur of kind of more elaborated and musical presentation. So I think it was this basic expectation that anybody who was a reader, which was one of the official designations that they had in the early church, they were singing, they were chanting, and they were bringing in a lot of the ways that things would have been done in the synagogues. And that's another interesting story. How long the Christians were obviously in the synagogues for a while, and after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, they continued to be in the synagogues until they were kicked out. And when they were finally kicked out of the synagogues and had to make their way, they carried with them that same tradition of contabulation. And that's...
What does that
Yeah,
mean?
contabulation is basically when you are just reciting a text, but it's almost with a spoken rhythm, but it's on the same pitch. So it's contabulation. And you have variations of that. You have, inflections that might have a kind of cadence, things like that. But it's not different from the spoken rhythm of the text. And it's a way to emphasize. It's a way to bring further emphasis to the text itself.
Well, I think that's interesting because I'd be tempted to think that if we sing, we're distracting. It would be, the mentality I think we have today is, for example, why aren't we singing the gospel at Mass then? Why do we read it or should we be singing the gospel at Mass? And what about the epistle? Like, is singing more in the church's tradition? Is it closer to how we always did it? Or
Yeah, singing is definitely closer to how we always did it. And in fact, the parts that would have become spoken were the parts that then the priest would have been praying quietly to himself. And the rest of the Mass was sung, all of it, by the priest included. And so I think the development of microphones and amplification systems made it easier for us to have a liturgy where everybody's just kind of talking to each other, talking to God. But really, that isn't the tradition of the church. And in fact, vocal music is really the music of the church par excellence. And I think that was another interesting thing I discovered as I was reading this book about the first 4 centuries of music in Christianity, is that instruments, right, musical instruments, which there were plenty of, were associated with temple worship to cover up the sounds of those poor animals. Yeah. So, yeah. In the synagogue, there was vocal music. Instrumental music was reserved for the temple. It was understood that was the character of temple worship, was instruments. And so the Christians, maintaining that distinction of themselves from temple worship and from the sacrifices that were taking place in the temple, chose very clearly not to have instruments for a long period of time at the Eucharistic gatherings that they had. So you had the other reason they wouldn't do it is because that was the pagan cults. The pagan cults would use instruments. So in order for the Christians to have a defining characteristic of their liturgy in terms of music, they stepped away from instruments. And for the first 4 centuries, just no evidence of instruments. So it was all vocal.
So what you're saying is we're not going to be hearing you playing the saxophone from the choir loft anytime soon?
No. For other reasons, but yes, that's right.
Well, before we get into the O Antiphons themselves, obviously the first thing that people are probably going to recognize is that you're going to sing it in Latin. Mm-hmm. So I figure we should probably, chat about that a bit because, I understand everyone has their own feelings on Latin, and of course we respect everyone's, feelings about Latin. But what do you see as the, I don't know, like the joy in singing Latin versus English or any other language for that matter?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Another fascinating thing, because if you look at it, if we're talking about the early church also, was the first liturgy in Latin? And of course the answer is no. It was in Greek. They had to have a worthy translation of the scriptures before they were prepared to bring them into a liturgical setting. And so you have the Septuagint, right? That translation that was made into Greek of the Old Testament, which would have been used in most of the diaspora, and then also, and that would have been the easiest thing also for the Gentiles and the Jews to be able to connect on as they're becoming Christians together, is this Greek translation of the Septuagint. And it wasn't until the church was looking to do a more missionary outreach towards the West that they adopted Latin. And it wasn't until St. Jerome translated the Vulgate that we had a worthy enough, according to the church, a worthy enough translation of the scriptures to put it into the liturgy. So I think that the criteria for the church as to what language they're going to use in the liturgy really has to do with how worthy the translation of the scriptures are. And so I think that what's incredible is how long the translation that St. Jerome, with some modifications, did has stood the test of time. And in that beautiful Christianized Latin, right? Because it wasn't the Latin of Cicero. In fact, St. Augustine complained about the Latin of the Christians. He said, this is like ugly. They're like, it's weird. Because St. Jerome, in his translation of the scriptures, of the Psalms in particular, wanted to capture the unique features of Hebrew, right? Because he went back and didn't just look at the Septuagint, but he was also looking at the original Hebrew. So he wanted to capture the genius of the poetry of the Psalms into his translation, the Vulgate. And so you just have this genius translation into Latin that incorporates the early preaching of the church, the early style of the church. It's a transformed Latin. It's not classical Latin. It's Christian Latin, and it's liturgical Latin. So you kind of like we had, these wonderful developments of architecture, a place that's fitting to worship God. Christians developed a language that was fitting to worship God.
Wow.
And that's what that early connection to Latin was, and then continued to be for over 1,000 years. And within all of that, the great tradition of Gregorian chant gave birth to the polyphony, the wonderful settings of polyphony that we have. And they're all connected to this language, and it was something that our ancestors had carried. And so it's only very, very, very recently in the Catholic Church that we have stepped aside from this great heritage. And I think that people can struggle to, one of the big struggles today is, well, I don't understand what all of the words mean. And I think that there's something to that. But I also think that the music itself transmits a message. And the image I like to use, because that was one of the big arguments that people who went too far after the council used, is they said that modern man you can't communicate with him via symbols. He needs direct message. He needs something that he can understand, something that's intelligible, like, surface level. None of this, deeply nested symbolic stuff. Well, I mean, and you look today, everybody's using emojis, and it's like, no, I need a meme. I need the perfect meme. I mean, that's symbolic language, if anything. And here we are in a very secular way, trying to recover a symbolic language that's been just, in a lot of ways, taken away from us, from the liturgy. And the liturgy was the place of great symbols.
How do you appreciate it? Like, let's suppose you're somebody who's actually, you don't really like Latin because you feel like you don't know what it's saying, and that you said, well, the music is itself part of the message. Maybe there's just an adjustment that we have to make almost in our expectation. I mean, how do you approach, how should people approach Latin chants?
And I think that's what you say. That's maybe the good way to think about it, is that the chant itself, the melodies of the chant itself, have been formed by the meaning of the words that are used, right? So you are not going to know the definition of those words, but the meaning that's behind those words has been captured by the melodies.
Oh, wow.
And I think that, and another thing, there was a teacher that I work with who said, when he explains things, he says, when I pick up a CD of Gregorian chant, nobody has CDs anymore. Anyways. When I pick up a CD of Gregorian chant, it's not because I'm going to jam out to it, in my car. Like, I'm going to jam. No, it's a very different kind of headspace. It's a very different kind of music. It's a music that's designed for prayer. It's a music that's designed to facilitate meditation. It's not a music that's designed to excite the emotions, even though it can. It's not a music that's designed to distract you from what's going on. It's a music that's designed to help you be centered and to be listening more carefully. We've been using Gregorian chant, the full Latin propers, at St. Ignatius now for about a year, and what I love about it is not that I understand every word that's being sung, but that the musical setting itself helps me to prepare to listen to the readings, which are in the vernacular and now in English. And so I'll be able to hear, I'm paying attention. I'm not distracted. I'm not in my, my nostalgia, my feelings or somewhere else. I'm available to listen. So I think that's the genius of chant.
And I love what you said there, because I think a lot of people might not be aware of that. You used the phrase, you said, when we pray the full Latin propers. So that would mean the prayers that are specific to that Mass with the propers, right?
Right. Those proper texts.
So that would be like when the priest is coming in, after communion, there'd be another one. There'd be one during the offertory.
Right.
Right. So the church's liturgy actually has biblical texts, and they relate to the readings.
Right. Well, and
it
relates to the liturgy of the day. Yeah.
So that's amazing, because it's really like the church being very aggressive or assertive, saying we want someone who's coming in here to encounter the Word of God.
Yeah.
And so we're going to do it by the emotions that are in those words. You don't have to understand what we're saying, but the emotions that are of the meaning of that, we're going to bring out the content, I guess. I'm saying emotions, but it's probably not the right word. But we want you to encounter the Word on the inside just by hearing it. And that's all going to fit. Like the melodies are designed to fit. Am I right? I'm just trying to unpack a little bit what you said, because I think that's really interesting, and people might not. It seems like there's a deeper meaning there.
You can go really deep on Gregorian chant, and sometimes there's a few things through the CMAA that I've looked into, the Catholic Music Association of America, and there's a style to the way that the offertory chants are written that's different from the style of the communion chants. And honestly, that even to this day, I wouldn't be able to identify that very clearly myself. But there was a lot, there's centuries and centuries that went into the preparation of these antiphons. And people would recognize, we just to kind of come back to, these antiphons, because we're going to talk about the O Antiphons. There's entrance antiphon, called the introit, like you were mentioning, the communion antiphon, the communio, the offertory antiphon. All of those texts, most of the time biblical texts, that are part of the assigned liturgy for the day, became so well known to people that they identified specific Sundays of the year with this title of the entrance antiphon, the first words that were being sung at the Mass. And so Gaudete Sunday, right? We hear, that's the Sunday in Advent where the priest wears pink or rose or whatever. That's because the first word of the entrance antiphon was Gaudete, right? Or Laetare Sunday in Lent. There's some others. There's Quasimodo Sunday. It's probably less well known, but Quasimodo, and the Way of Little Children, and that's one of the Sundays, I think, leading up to Lent, just in the pre-Lenten season. Yeah.
When the priest walks in with a hunch.
Right. Yeah.
Well, honestly, that's a great transition you did there. Thank you for that. Let's start with what is an antiphon? Like, I'm sure there are better Catholics out there than me who know this, but for those average Catholics like me, what I see it all over the place. I've never known. What is it?
Right. Well, antiphon, right? There's a Greek kind of root there, antiphonos, right? So it's like the back and forth of a singing or of a trading of a text. And again, this comes from that long-standing tradition in the church, all the way back to the first centuries of the church, that when there was a text that was being read, or as we know, cantabulated or sung, that the people had their place of response to that. And it was usually something like an Alleluia or an Amen. There were other formulas that we're not as familiar with, the doxologies, glory to the Father and to the Son, all glory be. You would have those sorts of responses that everybody knew, and so they would then respond to the texts. And for different seasons, for different times of the year, as the liturgy developed, the texts that were appropriate responses, or the texts that became important, were then assigned, and they were given a specific place. So these antiphons refer to a much shorter piece of text that could be an excerpt from a psalm. It could have to do with a particular mystery of Christ. If it's a liturgical season, like we're coming up to Christ the King, and that, and that feast day, which is a little bit more recent in the church's calendar. But anyway, that would have all of the antiphons for that day, which happened during the Mass. We talked about that. So you've got entrance antiphon, offertory antiphon, communion antiphon, a short text that gives a light on the day. Well, you also have antiphons at the other times of day when the church prays during the divine office. So, morning prayer, lauds, evening prayer, vespers. You've got these short texts that then are paired with the psalms that are chanted, by the monks and by all religious and by all priests, in fact. And we're all to recite the divine office. And so those antiphons bring a light for the season or a light of the liturgical day into the psalms that we're praying as well. So that's kind of the function today of the antiphons, and that's the function also of the O Antiphons in particular.
Yeah. So talk about the O Antiphons. Like, why has it got an O?
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, the O. That's the vocative form of the Latin, but it's just calling out to these titles of Christ. And these antiphons are used on the final days of the Advent season leading up to Christmas. So beginning, and then. Well, we don't have time to talk about it, and that's fine. But there have been a wide variety of the ways that these antiphons have been used. We've got 7. The Anglicans added an 8th one. There were times at different places where they had 12. There were times where they would do the antiphons beginning on the feast of St. Nicholas.
December 6th.
Yeah. And so today, these days, we start, in the Catholic Church, we have 7 days with the O Antiphons beginning on the 17th. At Vespers, so evening prayer, and surrounding Mary's song, Mary's canticle, the Magnificat.
So talk a little bit more about, like, was this a part of ours then? Or, like, just praying the hours? Or did this have its own kind of place within?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Certainly, this was part of the Benedictine tradition by the 12th century. There is some evidence. I did a little research on this. It's not something I just carry around in my back pocket. But there's plenty of interesting things out there if you're looking for more information on the antiphons. But some say that there is a passage in Boethius's the Consolation of Philosophy from the 6th century, where we already see O Sapientia, the text, because these texts of the O Antiphons are pulled from the Scripture. They're lightly adapted. There was some creative genius behind the exact formulation of the text of these antiphons. And so it wasn't just directly from the Scriptures. So that's how we know already this formula that Boethius is using in the 6th century was like, well, this was not exactly what's in Sirach or the Book of Wisdom or Proverbs. This is that's this kind of unique formulation. But certainly by the 12th century, it was definitely part of monastic chant. So much so that they created another version that many of us are also are probably even more familiar with. That's that chant or that hymn that we sing. O come, Emmanuel. So that was written in Latin, perhaps as early as the 12th century.
Oh, okay. So
perhaps
that Christmas carol, so to speak, is actually a Latin chant from monks. That melody.
Not the melody.
Okay.
Now the melody, that's another story. But the text, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so that's where you have kind of the difference between, and these are the two main traditions that we have in Catholicism with music and especially when it's just sung, is you have what's called the plain chant, and there's no in musical terms we say there's no meter to it. It's not, there's no like 4/4 time. You don't get a beat.
Right.
And that's the way that the Psalms are written. The Psalms are not written with an exact number of syllables in each line. It's written with an exact number of important syllables per line, but not with an exact number of syllables, which was the Jewish way of psalmodizing. Now, the Greek tradition, they were much more about metered music and regular numbers of syllables. And we can see that from, Homer's writings and things like that. And you've got this kind of these two traditions that are coming together of music and of poetry into Christianity. And so you first have these antiphons that are the more Jewish psalmody sort of tradition, chanted plain chant. And then later on, you've got this development that's more in the line of the Greek way of doing things with the metered O come, Emmanuel. And you can tell because you could use O come, Emmanuel. And then you've got, that's the English translation, right? Which became famous in the 1850s by the Oxford movement. So that would have been the Anglican movement, kind of recovering. They went back, they wanted to find some old stuff. So they found this old hymn in Latin that has the O antiphons, only 5 of them though, right? If you look at how many verses there are in O come, Emmanuel, there's only 5, and we've got 7, so there's 2 that's missing. You can check that out on your, which ones are missing. But anyway, and then the melody for O come, Emmanuel, interestingly enough, came from a French metered hymnody that would have been attached to the funeral rite, actually, in the 15th, 16th century. So the Libera Me would have been, so that's where the coffin is finally being entrusted, back to God, the body, immediate preparation for burial. You have these verses, that tune, da 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 da, would have been sung to a text for burial, Christian burial.
And all of this ties into the O antiphon theme that we're talking about, because just in case people missed it, that hymn is the texts that the monks are going to be singing, called the O antiphons, that we're talking about today.
Right. So you've got 2 versions of that text.
Okay.
One is the one that we've used in the liturgy as antiphons, and that's what we'll be singing. And then there's this other version of that text that's been, put into a much easier to sing, exact number of syllables, and that's the O come, Emmanuel.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So how is it like? How is it used? Like, because I've like Father kind of briefly explained it to me of like you're going backwards and you're like spelling something out.
Oh.
Talk about that a bit.
Sure. So, I think it's funny because it's true. If you take the titles of each one of the O antiphons in reverse order. So like here we look at it, we got the list here. So we have O Emmanuel, O Rex Gentium, O King of the Nations, O Radiant Dawn, O Oriens, O Key of David, O Clavis David, O Flower of Jesse's Stem, O Radix Yesse, O Sacred Lord, O Adonai, O Wisdom, O Sapientia. If you take the first letter in Latin of each of those backwards, like I just gave them to you, it spells out Ero Cross. Now, nobody knows if that was intentional or not, but Ero Cross in Latin means I will be here tomorrow, or I will be there tomorrow. Tomorrow I will be there. So all of these antiphons are pointing to the coming of Christ, right? And that's kind of Advent, the Advent season. This is the culmination of the Advent season. These last 7 days, we're really focused on the coming of Christ. And then you take these antiphons, the first letter of each one in Latin backwards is then I will be here tomorrow. Wow, that's great.
I can't imagine that was a
weirder things have happened, I guess.
I suppose.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. I was thinking about that. We tend to do this often in many different types of prayer, but when we focus on the titles of God or of the titles of Mary, or the different names, I guess, if you don't want to say titles, what do you see as the big, and you guys, what do you think is the, I guess the benefit in that? Why is it neat to look at this 7 different titles for God before he comes?
I think that what's cool about it is each one of these titles has a slightly different focus, and it allows for meditation. And these antiphons would have been used and continue to be used around Mary's song. And even some theologians, in looking at the way that these antiphons have been written, is that stylistically, there's even something in common with the Magnificat itself. The Magnificat, Mary's song, we know is pulling texts of scripture of the Old Testament together, and Mary's kind of made them her own song. She's made her own song out of the Old Testament. This is in a strange way, or in an interesting way, each one of these O antiphons are also similarly the Old Testament, but it's as though lived in the heart of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which I think is really, it's a compelling way to see how these O antiphons fit in with the liturgy, especially at that time, and especially it's right around the Canticle of Mary. So, O Sapientia, O wisdom, O holy word of God, you govern all creation with your strong yet tender care. Come and show your people the way to salvation. And so the first of these O antiphons that we get on the 17th sees as though coming from afar, wisdom who sees all things, guiding with strength and also with tenderness, right? And then the next one, O Adonai, O sacred Lord of ancient Israel. All of a sudden he's come closer, right? Sapientia, that's wisdom, that's governing all things from on high. O Adonai, suddenly he's closer, who appeared to Moses in the burning bush, who gave him the holy law on Mount Sinai. Come, stretch forth your mighty hand. And then O Radix Jesse, it's kind of the same thing. It's getting close to the people of Israel. O Key of David. And here we see in particular a title that would have been given for the Blessed Virgin Mary. O royal power of Israel, controlling at your will the gate of heaven, come break down the prison walls of death. You can imagine the Blessed Virgin Mary in some ways reflecting on Christ, whom she's going to give birth to, who's in her womb, and she's waiting for him to break forth, to set the prisoners free. Come break down the prison walls of death for those who dwell in the darkness and the shadow of death. And so at each juncture, it's though he's getting a bit closer, right? O Orions, now we're talking about a star that all can see, right? The star of Christmas, even, if you will, right? And then O Orions also means the one who is risen, right? So Orions on the one hand means the east. It's also referring to a rising. O radiant dawn, O one who is risen, O splendor of eternal light, Son of justice, come shine on those who dwell in darkness and the shadow of death, right? God causes his justice to shine on the just and the unjust alike. And then O Rex Gentium, King of all the nations. So now it's not just the Jewish people, it's everybody. And then O Emmanuel, and we know that title means O God with us, who is now with us. So in a certain way, you could see each of these titles, if we meditate on them and take them to prayer with the Blessed Virgin Mary, it's like the proximate coming of the Lord. And each day, it's as though he's drawing closer in different ways, closer to us as a chosen people for the Jews, closer to us as human beings, as the Gentiles for whom this message was destined.
Well, yeah, and I think there's two of those that are particularly interesting because Emmanuel means God is with us. So if you're to speak that proximity that increases, the last one is literally God is with us. And then O Oriens, which is the day star, is interesting. That's on the 22nd of December, which is, of course, it's tied into the cosmology of the time because it's the first. So the solstice is the 21st. So that's going to be the darkest day of the year. The 22nd, the day star comes back. The sun is coming back. So it even has this cosmological element tied into it. Yeah. The monks were pretty attentive people.
Well, and then these have also inspired contemporary musicians as well with new settings. And in particular, O Radiant Dawn, there's a setting by James McMillan of that's just incredibly gorgeous. And so if you get a chance to listen to O Radiant Dawn, James McMillan, check that out. Catholic composer, and he's still living and is fantastic.
That's awesome. I mean, it's so funny. Like, any time we've ever talked about like music in the church, it's like, oh yeah, everything we did was on purpose. And it's like this is actually really logical. It sounds super complicated because it's sung in Latin and maybe not a way you know how to sing. Mm-hmm. But it's just like, it's so funny when you explained it so simply. It's just like, oh yeah, duh.
How would an average person pray with this? Like, would you recommend that we listen to it and, or is it just part of the liturgy? Is there a way that this, or maybe it's not accessible to a normal person? But is there any way someone could incorporate this practically into their family that would help them to use these texts?
Sure. So a couple of things. I think the church definitely wants people to pay attention to these antiphons. The sign of it is that in the liturgical reform, we brought these antiphons into the text of the Mass itself. So now the Alleluia verses, provided that they are actually recited or sung on the days before and leading up to Christmas, you will find the text of these antiphons. So even if you're going to daily Mass, if you're listening for them, even if you're not praying the office, you will hear them. You've got, like we talked about, you maybe really using O Come, Emmanuel as an Advent hymn, because it's really, boy howdy, if you're looking for an Advent hymn and not a hymn that's like a Christmas hymn, but we sing during Advent anyway, or a hymn that doesn't really belong in Christmas, right? There's a much better one for Christmas. It's of the Father's love be God. That one's great for Christmas. O Come, Emmanuel is great for the Advent season. I read online that there was somebody that has suggested getting a copy of the texts and then each evening, having a candle or maybe even a candelabra that you could then light a candle while reciting as a family the O Antiphon, the text of the O Antiphon. And you've got that leading up to Christmas, beginning on the 17th.
Interesting, just as another random kind of practice for Advent. I was at dinner with a family who ate dinner every night during Advent in the dark. So a candlelight dinner, only candlelight allowed to embody that kind of a waiting as the people who sit in darkness have, seen a great light kind of thing. So, that could tie in to it. These practical ways of living Advent are really important for us because if we don't do anything special, it won't be special. We'll be listening to Elvis Christmas carols from Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
We can do better than this, but we have to try. Yeah. But if you do try, suddenly life becomes very mysterious and poetic. Mm-hmm. And praying with these antiphons, I think it's wonderful reciting them, but I think also listening, because you can find these all over the place, right? If you just type in O Antiphons, is that?
Yeah. Yeah, you won't even find anything else. O Antiphons, that's all you'll find. You won't accidentally stumble on something you didn't want to see.
Yeah. Well, and at SJI, of course, we'll be offering them too. This is what we're going to focus on for our whole Advent, the spiritual significance inside of all of these.
Great.
I mean, that's a great kind of another segue, Father, of, what Advent's kind of, as much as we would like to do what we did during Lent and do daily videos for every day, another set of 56 videos may actually, be the end of me. But so we're gonna run these, obviously the last week going up until Christmas. But what else? I mean, I think that the dinner by candlelight's really cool. Do you got either of you have any like suggestions for how to? It's like we all know how to do Lent, and nobody knows how to do Advent, and it's kind of silly because it's like it's only 2 times a year, right? Like that we can do some preparing. Do you guys have any like suggestions or anything that has worked really well for you, or maybe even something just from the history of the church?
I will mention last year it was the first. I'm a new pastor, so I'm figuring things out. Being a pastor at a church, another pastor up at Assumption. I'm trying to remember which day he did it on, but he had all of the kids bring in the infant Jesus from their nativity set, and it was a special blessing of the infant Jesus that they would all bring in, so they could then take him home and be ready to place him in the creche, in the manger when the time was right. And I think that trying to connect with some of the beautiful things that are there, having a nativity scene out, I think is a great way also to help us meditate when we come home. We are waiting for. I mean, as silly as decorations may seem to some people, they really are pretty effective in helping us to remember when we come into a place that we're waiting.
Many people I know struggle, and I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't have an answer, but I know people talk to me every year about, isn't there Advent music? Because they really want to put Christmas carols, after Christmas. And of course, celebrating what they call the usus antiquior, which is the older calendar, you can have a 40-day long Christmas. In the reform of Vatican II, they've shortened it sometimes to a week and a half, 2 weeks. But you can celebrate it for 40 days and still in their church. So people are happy to do Christmas carols then. But for those who want to find Advent music, do you have any resources that you could recommend?
I mean, the first, it may seem silly, but the first place to look is in the hymnals that you would find in church. I know in the ones that we use, the Source and Summit hymnals, there's a section for Advent. And, there are, O Come Thou Long Expected Jesus.
On Jordan Banks.
Right, the Baptist cry. People Look East, as we jokingly say, except for the priest. Just kidding. Ha, ha, ha. People look east, the time is near. Yeah, so there's lots of great Advent hymns. And maybe I don't think that I certainly don't remember growing up hearing many of them. But they're in our hymnals, and they're definitely there.
Also, I think if you type in Gregorian chant Advent, there's got to be recordings of the church's liturgy during Advent.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I know I'd have to go back and look, but there's at least one good recording. I mean, there's lots of good recordings. It's one good recording that I know of that's specifically Advent Gregorian chant. So I'll have to put that in the show notes or something, as they say.
Yeah, and there's other. I know if you really want to get very practical, it's rather cheesy, but again, if you want practical ideas, Maria Van Trapp from the Van Trapp Family Singers from The Sound of Music, she made a big thing about bringing all the old German customs to bear. And if you go online and type in Maria Van Trapp Advent, Maria Van Trapp Christmas traditions, there's some really beautiful things from, this would be the 19th century German or 18th century German kind of traditions from their small towns regarding candles and recipes and things to make that Advent season special. And I've actually seen the book that is printed that she made. She was something of a phenomenon in the 50s and 60s where she really tried to bring some of this kind of Christian or Catholic actually culture to be offered for people, and it was quite popular. So you can still find some of that information around. It gives some nice things you can do that are touching in that way. But the Advent wreath at home is certainly evocative of different things that are good. And I remember it's also a time of penance. So the priests wear purple, which is the sign of the Passion of our Lord, just like he does in Advent or in Lent, because we're supposed to be correcting our sinful ways. And so fasting, it's a part of the Advent tradition to fast, to give something up. When I was little, we used to have little little baby or the manger in the home, and Mom would give us a piece of straw if we were good that day with our fast or our sacrifices. So then we would make it softer for Jesus when he was born. So Jesus would be laid in the crèche, and we knew we all put pieces of straw in each day as our sacrifice.
I really like that. I was actually thinking about too. I mean, if someone wants some practice leading up to the O Antiphons, I've been trying. I've realized right now me praying all of the hours every day. I can't make that happen yet. I'm working on it. I'll get there. So I've just been praying just night prayer and realize how much that's really impacted my prayer life. But is there a part of the hours that someone could do that's I know it can be really intimidating, maybe more for me because I've watched you guys do it. But is there a part of the hours that you could encourage people that throughout Advent maybe just do this part or even just praying Mary's prayer? Is there something like that you could connect to?
Well, the night prayer is definitely the place to start.
Yeah.
And to finish your day with, they call it a Marian antiphon. So the Salve Regina or the Alma Redemptoris Mater, for example, and then you can change those by the liturgical season. So to start anything, the last prayer of your day, make it one to Mary. And that's a great way to start. And then, honestly, doing liturgy hours, I mean, I would go backwards and do night prayer, and then I would shift over to morning prayer. If you do morning prayer and night prayer every day, you're onto a good rhythm.
I don't know if you want to talk about it, but you're making fun of me.
No. Not yet.
Not yet. Give it time. Just like, oh yeah, you do the shortest one.
No, that's a good one. That's a good one to do. The examine. The Jesuits would be proud of you. So that's good. The good ones, yes.
Father, I don't know if it's worth talking about, but you were saying about like ending your prayer or your night prayer, the final prayer you say to Mary. I love that the tradition that the brothers had of not speaking after that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'll let the brother speak about that.
Yeah. That comes from I would say an old monastic practice of making sure that when we end our day with the Blessed Virgin Mary and entrust to her, all of our speech, everything we might say, and then we refrain from speaking. The whole idea is so that after we've, examined our conscience and after we've really entrusted ourselves to her care, that then we don't go and sully things by opening our big mouths and destroying the peace of the night and the peace of the evening that obviously our Lord would want us to have. So
I know there's one family that when I talked to about that, we used to call it the grand silence, which I think is kind of a term. But that grand silence begins, you say, the name of Mary, and after the name of Mary, you keep silence until the next morning, when the first thing you say in the church, you take your right hand, you make the sign of the cross over your mouth, and you say, Lord, open my lips, and my mouth will proclaim your praise. So we're starting off trying hard. Like when we talk, it's going to be good. And then at the end of the day, we regret it. We say Mary and we keep silence. But there was a family that was doing this with their kids. So because I said the kids so loved it, they got their kids little hoodies, gray-colored hoodies to match the habit of the Brothers of St. John. And so after they'd sing the Salve Regina, all the kids would put their hoodie up and then, and keep silence. And then eventually they caught on that this was a ploy from the parents. But they got a couple of good night's sleep out of it anyway.
I was going to say, it may sound silly to some people, but for parents, be like, oh, no, we can't.
It's the grand silence.
No asking for water. No, it's time to sleep. Well, guys, I think that was awesome. I mean, it's like I said, the more I learn, the more I'm just like, man, the church has really thought about these things, and it's like we didn't do anything by accident. So I'm really looking forward to we're going to be recording these in a week here or so. Really looking forward to hearing them myself and then sharing them with you. So we'll like I said, before the week before Christmas, we'll be releasing a daily video that will have. Are you going to have your choir, or is it just going to be you?
The jury is out.
The jury's out. Okay. Yes. Well, it'll be a surprise for all of us.
There we go.
But it's not even a choir. What's the term?
Scola. Would have
yeah. So yeah, we'll be doing. We'll have Father sing the song, and then Father Nathan will give kind of a brief little reflection on it. And yeah, we hope you guys all enjoy, and hope you have a very holy and happy Advent. So thank you very much, and thanks for talking,
Thanks,
guys.
Father.
God bless. Thanks.
Yahweh.